Hi everyone, welcome to the 102 Hours YouTube channel. Tonight we're going to talk about the story of a woman who turned the jagged beauty of the Colorado Rockies into her private stage for murder. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Case name, The Black Widow of the Rockies, the story of Sharon Nelson, who preyed on the very husbands she vowed to cherish. Told in second person, you're about to trudge through mountain passes where beauty and betrayal intertwine. Are you ready? Let's begin. You step onto the winding trail just as dusk creeps over the peaks, a brittle wind rattling pine needles overhead. The air tastes of juniper and cold earth, a sensory fact of these mountains where, since the early 20th century, explorers and settlers alike whispered about disappearances that could only be described as cold-blooded betrayals. In 1910, famed forensic chemist James Marsh revolutionized poison detection in America, an innovation that would later crack poisoning cases that seemed destined to go unpunished. Tonight, it feels as though every rustle in the underbrush hides a secret. Among those secrets was Sharon, warm smile, eager laugh, and a string of husbands who all met suspicious ends. Investigators still question whether she acted alone or had an accomplice tipping her off to the best insurance policies. You follow faint tracks beside a narrow ridge, aware that the Rockies have witnessed countless tragedies, broken legacies from avalanches, ill-fated prospectors, and, far too often, murderers cloaked in domestic bliss. You hear the distant trill of a lone elk, but your heart beats louder, anticipation and unease mingling, like the thrill of a true crime documentary you can't look away from, yet dread to immerse yourself in. The wind shifts, carrying the faint clang of horseshoes on stone. That sound might have been Sharon's arrival at each husband's remote cabin, greeting him with fresh coffee before slipping arsenic into his cup. A fringe rumor claimed she collected widow spider figurines, positioning them as eerie trophies beside each body, a detail no court ever confirmed, yet whispered in hotel bars across Denver. Take a breath. You've just glimpsed the harsh beauty of these mountains and the chilling presence of a woman who used every picturesque vista to hide her crimes. Now imagine Sharon descending that same trail, face serene, eyes fixed on her next victim. Her reputation as a doting wife made neighbors envy her, little did they know her tenderness masked a will forged in cold calculation. You can almost taste the pine resin on the breeze as you realize beauty can mask malevolence. No dramatic flashbacks here, just the present moment, your footsteps echoing, your pulse quickening as the path narrows. In these Rockies, wealth and wildness intersect. And for Sharon, the ultimate prize was always the insurance payout. Investigators still question whether her method evolved over time or if she simply grew more confident after the first death. You pause, heart pounding, and recall the gritty fact that over 20% of American murder convictions involve poisoning, more than any other single method outside firearms. It's a historical truth that makes every bottle on a shelf seem suspect, every friendly smile a potential threat. Ahead, a weathered cabin hovers in the moonlight. Smoke curls from its chimney, but there's nobody around, just the echo of Sharon's laughter in your mind. You feel the pull of both dread and fascination, the duality that true crime lovers crave. Your journey has begun in the shadow of these Rockies, where Sharon Nelson left a trail of answers no amount of scenic beauty could obscure. And now, with every careful footstep, you're inching closer to the heart of darkness she carved into these mountains. You press your palm against the weathered clapboard siding of the Coit family's old Victorian on the outskirts of Rocky Ford, Colorado, breathing in the sharp tang of sagebrush mixed with sun-baked dust. You're standing where Sharon spent her childhood summers, long before she slipped arsenic into her husband's coffee cups. Back then, the town's only claim to fame was its cantaloupe crop, and rumors of backyard snake-handling churches, until a string of unexplained deaths put it on the map. Even in the 1930s, poison was already notorious as a weapon of choice. Anna Marie Hahn, a German-American nurse, became the first U.S. serial poisoner executed in decades when she was hanged in 1938 for murdering elderly patients, proof that medical trust could mask a killer's cunning. Inside, the parlor's floral wallpaper curls at the edges, and you almost hear the laughter of a little girl chasing a moth across the rug. Sharon's mother, they say, kept a battered recipe box full of grandmother's folk remedies, some cures harmless, others laced with belladonna and arsenic. Investigators still question whether those yellowed pages first taught Sharon how to slip a toxin into a teacup without leaving a trace. You step over a broken floorboard and feel the hollow echo underfoot. That faint whisper of regret flickers in your mind as you imagine Sharon scrawling sums in a secret ledger, her pencil scratching next to each husband's fingerprint. The ledger supposedly listed life insurance payouts alongside newspaper clippings of mining accidents, an eerie side hobby no one ever confirmed in court, but a fringe tale locals swap over beers. Outside, the afternoon light slants low, casting long shadows that stretch like dark fingers across the dusty lawn. Sharon's family was no portrait of normalcy. Her father, a silver miner with calloused hands, disappeared without explanation when she was 11, another Rocky Ford mystery that went unsolved. You feel the echo of broken promises in every breeze, the town's half-forgotten tragedies seeping into this house. In the kitchen, the wood stove still bears scorch marks from a summer when a pot of stew boiled over, sending flames licking the plaster. Some say young Sharon watched that fire with fascination, as if she craved the power to transform comfort into chaos. You can almost taste the charred residue on your tongue, the tang of burnt rosemary lingering like a memory. Remember that lingering smoke. You trace the stain upward to imagine Sharon's silhouette, perched on a high stool, mixing herbs and powders under flickering lamplight. You hear the soft drip of condensation from a cracked window pane, each plink like a warning, beauty and danger entwined. A mainstream fact, the term Black Widow wasn't popularized until the 1950s, decades after Mary and Cotton in Britain became one of the first infamous female poisoners. Yet here in Rocky Ford, long before tabloids coined the phrase, Sharon's quiet childhood prepared her for a darker legacy. Her schoolmates recall a shy girl who excelled at chemistry experiments, distilling water, turning apple peels into acidic solutions. They marveled at her precision, never guessing that precision would later become a weapon. You almost forgive that innocent ambition, almost, before realizing how easily scientific curiosity can cross into calculated malice. Investigators still question whether a local apothecary, said to have supplied arsenic under the table, played a role in Sharon's early experiments. Perhaps it was the memory of her father's disappearance, or deep-seated survival instincts born from a childhood on the edge of those jagged peaks, but Sharon learned to value life only when it came with a price tag. You step back into the afternoon glare, dust motes dancing in the sunbeam like tiny ghosts. In that moment, you feel the weight of history pressing in, every hush of wind across the river, every abandoned mine shaft, every cantaloupe field concealing secrets. The Rockies don't forget easily, and neither do the children molded by their harsh beauty. Now, with evening approaching, you realize that Sharon's early years were more than a backdrop, they were her apprenticeship. The very mountains she called home taught her how to hide the scent of death beneath layers of pine and soil. Your heartbeat slows for a breath as you stand in her childhood playground turned crime laboratory. You hear the distant chime of the old church bell, yet here there's no sanctuary, only the knowledge that childhood shadows can stretch far into adulthood, twisting innocence into something lethal. You follow the music drifting from a rickety pavilion, the scent of funnel cakes and horses mingling in the cool evening air. There she stands, Sharon in a pale blue dress that catches the fading light, her eyes bright as she laughs alongside a tall rancher whose hat is tipped just so. You feel the thrill of new love in your chest, imagining how easy it would be to fall for her warmth. In Victorian England, arsenic earned the nickname inheritance powder, thanks to its favored use by murderous spouses, an unsettling fact that turns every wedding gown into a potential crime scene. Take a breath. The first husband's name was Thomas, a widowed cattle buyer who admired Sharon's sharp wit. You hear the scrape of his boots on wooden planks as he offers his arm, and you notice how Sharon tilts her head, accepting with a coy smile. She insisted on spiderweb patterned lace woven into her veil, a fringe rumor locals whisper at the Steamboat Springs diners. No court records mention the motif, yet the image clings to your mind like dew on pine needles. You walk beside them along muddy paths after the fair, thunderheads gathering over distant peaks. Sharon's laughter rings hollow against the storm's rumble, but you're drawn in by the promise of adventure. Investigators still question whether she truly loved Thomas or merely saw dollar signs when she learned of his substantial life insurance policy. You can almost taste the copper tang of tension in the air, as though the rocks themselves know something you don't. That faint whisper on the wind, was it the echo of the fair's accordion, or the soft click of a viol's cap? You realize the chemistry set she displayed at the 4-H booth wasn't just an innocent hobby. Historical accounts show that by the 1940s, small-town fairs often showcased amateur distillation and basic toxicology experiments, innocent displays that sometimes masked darker talents. Sharon's alchemy display, she claimed, distilled rainwater into drinking supply. Neighbors now joke it could just as easily become a weapon. Pause and reflect. You've seen her skill with glassware, pipettes and flasks arranged like a surgeon's tools. You imagine her fingertips staining faint yellow, the residue of arsenic compound she tested on rocks from the riverbed. A quirky detail persists: she kept a cedar box etched with her initials, rumored to house small metal compartments perfectly sized for microgram doses. No autopsy ever mentioned its contents, but the box surfaced during a late-night search of her trailer. You trail behind as Sharon and Thomas slip into a candlelit chapel carved into the mountainside, vows exchanged under a canopy of fir branches. You feel the soft burn of candle smoke in your lungs and hear the pastor's voice trembling as he speaks of eternal devotion. But beneath that sacred moment, the specter of inheritance powder looms. The FBI defines a serial killer as one who commits 3 or more murders with psychological gratification, yet Thomas's death would be just one note in Sharon's deadly symphony. Investigators still question whether Thomas's sudden fever was genuine or induced by a slow-acting toxin. You sense the gulf between trust and treachery widening, like the chasm between mountain peaks. That evening, she poured him a glass of crisp white wine, toasting their future. You can almost see the swirl of liquid catching the candlelight, every glint a reminder that beauty can blind. Take a quiet moment. Feel the moss underfoot and the hush of mountain air settling around you. Remember the innocent expectation in Thomas's eyes as he sipped that wine. It's easy to overlook how quickly comfort transforms into complacency when trust is weaponized. As the honeymoon cabin's lanterns glow against the pines, you trace the hem of Sharon's dress, embroidered with tiny spiders, another unverified gossip passed from Aspen to Denver. She moved with a poised grace, as if choreographed, each step guided by careful calculation. You wonder if she felt a shiver of anticipation, or if it was merely the mountain breeze playing tricks. By the late 20th century, forensic science could detect arsenic in hair samples years after death, a breakthrough that should have deterred amateur poisoners. Yet here you are, walking beside that cabin, knowing the tools existed to expose her design. Investigators still question whether Sharon's exterior charm masked a strategic mastermind, or if she learned her craft through a series of fortunate mishaps. You pause at the cabin door, fingertips brushing the cold latch. The first marriage felt like a fairy tale until the morning he fell ill, fever burning through him like wildfire. You hear his labored breathing echo through the wooden walls. The world outside that door is silent now, save for the mournful cry of a lone hawk circling overhead. Summary pause: love can be deadly. Trust can kill. As you stand there, the scent of pine resin and spilled spirits mingles with the unspoken dread. You're poised on the brink of a story where vows and violence collide. The Rockies hold their secrets tight, but with every heartbeat, you edge closer to the moment where bliss twisted into betrayal, where the first husband's toast became his last. You trudge behind Sharon along a narrow ridge as dawn light bleeds over ponderosa pines, golden hues dancing with long shadows that stretch like weary travelers. The forest floor underfoot is spongy with pine needles. She chats about the crisp mountain air, her voice warm yet carrying an undercurrent of something else, calculation, perhaps. You're carrying 2 enamel mugs of tea, one for her, one for Thomas, their rims chipped but reliable. You watch Thomas cradle the steaming brew between calloused fingers, savoring the quiet. He inhales the aroma of chamomile with a slight grimace, muttering about an empty stomach. In the Rocky Mountains of the 1940s, locals often layered insurance riders onto policies to guard against logging accidents, financial foresight that would later catch Thomas's widow in a swirl of paperwork. A breeze rattles spruce cones along the trail, sending brittle needles spiraling toward the ground like grim confetti. Sharon pauses and turns, blue eyes gleaming like glacier ice. "He'll be fine," she says, voice calm. You nod, believing her, until Thomas arches his back with a sudden jolt. His gait falters, shoulders slumping. A bead of sweat trails down his temple, color draining from his face. "Not feeling well," he murmurs, voice tight. You drop your mug, the sound of porcelain striking stone splits the morning calm into shards of alarm. His knees buckle, and you lurch forward to steady him, breath catching in your throat. Hands trembling, you reach his side as his body bends like a broken sapling. Thomas's forehead pulses hotter than the midday sun, redness blossoming across pale skin. His breath comes shallow, each exhale a rasp reminiscent of worn bellows. You can almost taste copper on your tongue, fear or blood, you can't tell, which twists your stomach into knots. Sharon kneels beside him, brushing back his damp hair. You notice the faint sheen of moisture on her fingertips, as if she's been handling glass vials earlier in the night. "He must have eaten something bad," she whispers, voice hushed. The theory seems plausible until you recall the steak and potatoes he polished off without complaint just hours ago. The memory lingers like the acrid tang of pine resin that clings to the air. Thomas collapses fully, eyes rolling back as though seeking escape from his own body. You scramble for your canteen, splashing cold water across his face, droplets running down his jaw like crystal tears. The world tilts, leaves rustling in warning. You remember that in modern U.S. crime statistics, poisoners account for less than 2% of murders, yet their crimes leave deeper scars than a single bullet, infecting trust itself. You glance at Sharon, her expression serene yet distant, lips pressed into a tight line. Sharon's face blurs into something unreadable, her hand hovering over Thomas's chest as you press down, counting seconds that stretch into eternity, each beat echoing like a tolling bell. A pack of raven-black crows circles overhead, their cries a discordant choir that pierces the thick silence. You recall a fringe rumor. Sharon once bought a set of Victorian-era bridal glassware, each goblet etched with raised spider motifs and sold as a collector's oddity at an estate auction. No proof existed that she ever used them, or that they even held poison, but the image clings like frost on window panes, turning ivory chalices into sinister tools. After several agonizing minutes, the local physician, summoned by a frantic hiker, arrives, his leather satchel swinging at his side. He kneels, setting his stethoscope against Thomas's chest, brows furrowing. He examines Thomas's pulse, feels for jugular tension, then shakes his head. "It's his heart," he says, voice flat. That verdict feels hollow against the forest's hush and your pounding heart. You shiver as awareness pricks your spine. Arsenic poisoning can mimic cardiac distress in early stages. You witness the stretcher's ascent as the physician's boots crunch gravel with grim urgency, the white canvas cradling Thomas like a castaway on a storm-tossed sea. In the makeshift first aid tent, canvas walls slapping in the rising wind, Sharon insists on staying, monitoring every shallow breath, her composure unsettling. You pace outside, stirring dust and swirling it into tiny whirlwinds. You stoop to collect loose pine needles, gripping them as if they hold answers to an invisible puzzle. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of damp soil, pine sap, and something acrid that makes your nostrils flare, the faint memory of copper and burnt hair. Echoes of murmured gossip follow you down to the ranger station, 240s and still no cure, wife's too calm. Each hushed remark ricochets in your mind like stones across a silvered lake. Summary pause, real terror comes when innocence meets indifference. Remember that faint click. At dusk, You join Sharon by a flickering lantern hanging from the ranger station's porch. The lantern wavers, casting elongated shadows. The ranger, a grizzled man with weary eyes, hands her insurance forms instead of condolences, his voice gravelly as he recites policy numbers. She studies the papers with bright concentration, as though they were campfire maps pointing to fortune, her lips curling with a slight, efficient smile. You watch her slender fingers trace premium amounts and payout clauses in soft pencil strokes, figures that swelled when Thomas added a fatal accident clause exactly 2 weeks before his death. A question hangs between you like mist drifting down mountain slopes. Did she whisper suggestions into his ear? Investigators still question whether Sharon timed the dose to overwhelm local medical capabilities, if she calculated exactly how long it would take for symptoms to appear, ensuring he'd collapse miles from trusted help. That doubt coils in your mind, a living thing scratching at your thoughts. You close your eyes against the lantern's glare and can feel Thomas's warmth fading beside you, a life extinguishing in slow motion. The night air, once soothing, now chills your skin like ghostly fingertips, and the smell of pine sap turns sharp, almost chemical. Sharon rises, smoothing her skirt with deliberate grace. "I'll be all right," she assures you, voice soft as moss brushing rock. You don't respond, fixated on the lantern's wavering glow as if it holds the truth you desperately seek. Later, at the county coroner's office, you huddle in a cold hallway as samples are taken from Thomas's body. The coroner, face drawn in sorrow and skepticism, frowns at lab results showing trace heavy metals, levels deemed fatal only in controlled experiments. Yet the official cause of death lists acute cardiac arrest. You shiver, realigning the puzzle pieces, the sudden fever, the collapse on the ridge, the unexplained metals in tissue. The Rockies swallow secrets in their vastness, bury bodies deep beneath soil and stone. But whispers linger like ghostly footprints on a silent trail. Your breath freezes as thunder rumbles, a prelude to storms yet to come, both in the sky and in human justice. The first tragedy has occurred, and the mountain wind carries a lament you cannot shake. You're left clutching cold leaves and colder revelations, standing at the edge of belief that beauty can conceal betrayal. You step out of the coroner's office clutching a single sheet of paper heavier than its weight in gold, a check made out to Mrs. Sharon Lynn Nelson, payable for $250,000. The sunlight slants off its crisp edges, spotlighting the bank's granite facade where you deposited it just hours ago. You can almost hear the faint echo of coin presses from the early 20th century, when life insurance payouts first ballooned into a major crime incentive. By the 1950s, analysts estimated that financial gain motivated nearly 1 in 4 domestic homicides in America. Clutching the check, you feel the coarse texture of the paper, the smell of ink sharp in your nostrils. Someone once said that insurance policies are legal contracts with collateral, your loved one's life. Tonight, that contract has paid out in full. You turn the paper over and notice a tiny emblem of 2 clasped hands, ironically, a symbol of trust. The teller's practiced smile in the lobby feels brittle as she slides the envelope across the counter. You can almost taste the currency's iron tang, like blood in copper pipes. Sharon stands beside you, her posture impeccable in a tailored black suit that whispers of mourning, and more importantly, of newfound wealth. Did she buy it before Thomas fell ill? Investigators still question whether she timed his policy additions to coincide with seasonal bonus periods at his cattle buying firm, maximizing the payout to the exact penny. You glimpse her fingers brushing the suit's lapel, nails polished in midnight blue, a hue she chose, she claimed, to honor his memory. A fringe rumor insists she commissioned tiny spider brooches in the same shade to wear at the claims office, each one a silent nod to her deadly persona. No one ever confirmed those brooches existed, but the image sticks like moth wings on a screen door. You trail behind her through the lobby, where brass chandeliers cast kaleidoscopes of light on marble floors. The bank manager waves from behind a walnut desk, offering condolences laced with curiosity. You sense every conversation tilting toward one question: what will Mrs. Nelson do now? You can almost hear the gears of speculation grinding. This much money could buy any number of secrets, any number of new identities. In the parking lot, The autumn breeze carries the tang of fallen leaves, dust motes dancing around the sleek black car Sharon chose, hers now, fully paid for. You catch the faintest smell of fresh leather and gasoline, a scent as intoxicating as power. She slides into the driver's seat, her reflection fractured across the windshield like stained glass. You lean against the hood, feeling its cold steel press against your back, and wonder whether she even hesitates at all. Sharon's ambitions flare in her eyes, no longer wistful, but calculating. You imagine her pouring the money into plans rather than grief. Perhaps she's scouting real estate in Steamboat Springs, eyeing riverside cabins that sell for triple a rancher's wage. Or maybe she's quietly buying stock in that fledgling aviation firm advertising sightseeing tours of the Rockies. It's a twist of fate. While Thomas lies buried beneath pine needles, Sharon's future unfurls like a map of unclaimed horizons. A mainstream fact, the term Black Widow itself only entered criminology textbooks in the mid-20th century, after Scotland Yard linked several European poisonings to financial motives and began treating them as a distinct archetype. Yet here in America, the pattern played out again and again, wives cashing in on their husbands' policies and vanishing into new lives. You slide into the passenger seat as Sharon presses the key fob, the engine growling to life. The seats embrace you like velvet, its fibers whispering of luxury. The radio crackles on, playing a muted country tune that croons about heartbreak and hard times, an ironic soundtrack to someone rolling in cold cash. Sharon taps the dashboard, switching to a talk radio segment on finance tips. Her lips twitch into a faint upturn when the host mentions leveraging assets for ultimate gain. Investigators still question whether Sharon used Thomas's policy to fund the forensic test that later revealed arsenic in his hair, proof she somehow secured convincing lab results to mask her own misdeeds. You shove that thought aside as the car glides onto a winding road flanked by trembling aspen groves. The trees' golden leaves shiver overhead, sunlight filtering like fragments of stained glass. Sharon points to a modest cottage perched on the bluff above the river. "This could be mine," she says, voice bright. You squint against the glare, picturing her thumbs flicking through property deeds. You can almost hear the scratch of a pen signing her name in bold script, each stroke erasing Thomas's memory from these mountains. A quirky detail surfaces. Locals whisper she kept a ledger of every purchase, meticulously noting price, address, and the next husband's name beside each entry. No ledger ever surfaced at trial, yet the notion clings like a half-remembered fairy tale. Your heart tightens as the river's voice swells in the valley below, rushing water that could drown out any scream. You imagine Sharon standing on that cottage porch, surveying her domain like a queen surveying conquered lands. The money flows toward her like a river toward the sea, unstoppable and indifferent. Take another breath. Feel the car's vibration under your seat, the crisp air wafting through the cracked window. You sense the power of unchecked wealth coursing through Sharon's veins. What pleasure do you think she derives from the glow of a new kitchen light or the shimmer of a marble countertop, bought with blood-tainted funds? You shift in your seat as the car rounds a bend, and there, half hidden by pines, stands a custom billboard, Nelson and Associates, insurance specialists. You swallow hard. She's already franchising her newfound expertise, pitching to neighbors the very service that betrayed her own husband. The sign's letters gleam in the afternoon sun, each a little monument to avarice. A hush settles between you as the engine idles, leaves rustling like hushed whispers of town gossip. Sharon's gaze is fixed on that billboard, lips parted in a thoughtful arch. "We'll help families secure their futures," she murmurs, her tone businesslike, honed for boardrooms, not morning parlors. You glance at her profile, seeing ambition carved into her cheekbones like facets of a diamond. Investigators still question whether Sharon franchised the business to launder money or to immortalize her own legend as the ultimate insurance expert. The question hangs like mist on mountain tops, tantalizing, unresolved. You step out of the car, gravel crunching beneath your boots. The billboard looms behind you, a silent testament to power's promise and peril. The Rockies stretch beyond, indifferent to human schemes. You feel the weight of that check burn in your pocket, a reminder that here, wealth and wickedness often ride the same coattails. Tonight, as the sun dips below the peaks, you'll count every dollar of that payout and wonder which was heavier, the weight of paper or the weight of a life extinguished for profit. You slip into a corner booth at the Timberline Diner, the vinyl backing cracked like old leather and the Formica tabletop chipped at the edges. The scent of sizzling bacon and strong coffee hangs heavy in the air, mingling with the faint tang of pine resin drifting through the open window. A waitress in a faded denim apron glides past, her footsteps muffled by the worn linoleum floor. Around you, murmurs swirl, snatches of conversation about the latest tragedy, the third husband felled in less than 2 years. By the mid-20th century, criminologists observed that over 70% of homicides committed by women involved poison, a statistic that still makes every cup of tea feel like a gamble. You hear the scrape of a chair as an elderly rancher ducks his head, eyes darting across the room. "That's Sharon Nelson," he mutters under his breath, "must have some curse." The phrase lodges in your mind like a splinter. A fringe rumor suggests she wore a spider-shaped brooch at every public appearance, an odd talisman perhaps meant to honor her deadly reputation. No one's ever produced one, but the story sticks to town gossip like dew on morning grass. You lean forward as a hushed trio at the next booth exchange theories in low tones. One swears he saw Sharon slip out of the Steamboat Springs post office clutching a small vial wrapped in tissue. Another insists she met a stranger at midnight beneath the old watchtower, where she whispered plans like a sorceress stirring a cauldron. The diner's neon sign buzzes overhead, casting jittery shadows that dance across their worried faces. Investigators still question whether the sheriff's preliminary toxicology report was suppressed to spare the county embarrassment. Your pulse quickens as the waitress sets down a steaming mug of chili at your elbow, its spicy aroma cutting through the tension like a lightning strike. You wrap your palms around the bowl, feeling the heat seep into your skin. In that moment, the diner's warmth feels like an illusion, a fragile veneer that could shatter at any whisper. Summary pause, gossip can be as toxic as any chemical. You stand and press a few bills onto the counter, the change jingling like a warning bell. Outside, the afternoon sun glints off aspen leaves, turning them to flickering gold. You follow the chatter to the county courthouse, its sandstone facade weathered by decades of blizzards and flash floods. Inside, stale heat and polished wood mingle as you join a gathering of concerned townsfolk. A hastily posted notice on the corkboard advertises a community meeting to discuss unfortunate coincidences. You step into the crowded room, the murmur of voices folding around you like the folds of a heavy blanket. Candles flicker on a long folding table, illuminating stacks of binders labeled with hushed case numbers. The air feels thick, charged with suspicion and the weight of unanswered questions. In 1923, the first modern criminology lab opened in Chicago, setting standards for evidence that would later expose serial poisoners across America. An anxious teacher clears her throat at the lectern. She recounts how 3 husbands, all robust men in their prime, collapsed with similar fevers and cardiac distress, each in a different mountain town. She points to a map marked with red pins, Steamboat Springs, Rocky Ford, and a remote fishing lodge by Marble Creek. Each pin seems to pulse with unease. You sense the room lean in, collective breath held. A cattle rancher's wife stands next. Her voice cracks as she describes the ledger she discovered hidden behind a false panel in Sharon's trailer, pages filled with premium amounts and cryptic initials, each entry paired with a wedding date and a payout figure. She swears she saw tungsten glasses, too heavy for casual sipping, rumored to conceal tiny vials inside the stems, a detail no crime scene photo ever showed, yet retold in hushed tones over countless cups of coffee. Your stomach lurches as you imagine those goblets, their deceptive weight a cruel joke on unsuspecting lovers. The scent of old paper and candle smoke fills your lungs. Investigators still question whether the sheriff's deputies ever pursued those tungsten goblets or if they dismissed them as small-town myth. You slip out of the meeting and into the crisp mountain air, the collective anxiety clinging to your skin like frost. The wind rustles through spruce boughs, carrying the faint howl of a coyote in the distance. You follow a narrow path to the riverbank, where rushing waters churn around mossy boulders. The sound soothes and unsettles you at once. At the river's edge, you dig your heel into damp soil and recall a curious sight, a stack of insurance notices tacked to a bulletin board by the post office, each policy listing Sharon as beneficiary. You run your finger down the column of names and numbers, tasting the metallic sting of suspicion on your tongue. Rain clouds gather overhead, the first drop splattering on your arms like cold fingertips. By the 1970s, forensic advancements made hair analysis a key tool in poisoning cases, yet in Sharon's era, the technique was in its infancy, leaving early signs unnoticed. You crouch on a slick rock and watch the current pull leaves downstream, each one a tiny witness carried away from the scene. You can almost hear the uproar of investigations that never fully materialized, warrants issued then withdrawn, lab samples lost, interviews filed under no further suspicion. A soft click echoes in your memory, like the closing of a lock on hidden evidence. You trace that sound back to the sheriff's office, to the moment when rumor triumphed over proof. The clouds open, rain drumming a steady rhythm on the river's surface. You lean back, letting the cold wash over you, mingling dread with clarity. Take a breath. Feel the river's pulse beneath your fingertips, the weight of communal doubt settling in your chest. You realize that Sharon's greatest weapon may have been the community's disbelief, that a smiling wife in platform heels could ever harbor such darkness. You rise, water dripping from your coat, and head toward the jagged silhouette of the Rockies. Above, thunder rumbles like the distant applause of a jury yet to convene. Suspicion has taken root, spreading through towns like wildfire, and soon no cabin door will stay bolted against the truth. You step into the lace-curtained parlor of the Clayton farmhouse, breath catching at the mingled scents of lemon polish and fresh lilacs. Sharon stands by the window, sunlight filtering through delicate petals cast across her face. You feel the gentle weight of anticipation settle in your chest. This is the moment she traded mourning for matrimony once more. In modern U.S. crime statistics, female homicide perpetrators account for roughly 15% of convictions, and poison remains their most prevalent weapon, an unsettling reminder that history's most domestic settings can hide the darkest intentions. She greets her new husband, Paul Clayton, with a cool hug that sends the faint rustle of his starched collar brushing silk. You notice how Sharon's perfume shifts in the warm air, top notes of jasmine fading into a base of vetiver, as though she's orchestrated every olfactory cue to lull him into trust. A fringe rumor persists that she mixed a drop of bitter almond oil, a scent eerily similar to cyanide's faint almond aroma, into her personal fragrance, testing nervous reactions at social gatherings. No detective ever corroborated that claim, yet the idea clings to memory like moth wings on midnight lace. You follow them into the grand dining room, where a polished mahogany table gleams beneath crystal chandeliers. The chairs creak as Paul offers Sharon his hand, guiding her to the head of the table. You feel the air thicken, each breath tastes faintly metallic, as though the silverware itself anticipates violence. Investigators still question whether Sharon timed her courtship to coincide with Paul's lucrative harvest season, maximizing insurance incentives tied to those same crops he once sold by the ton. A pinprick of light from a stained glass lamp flares across Sharon's wedding band, a slender band of white gold engraved with 2 entwined roses. You recall that Victorian poisoners sometimes wore custom jewelry to commemorate their crimes, turning the macabre into personal adornment. This one seems innocent, but you can't shake the thought that every detail is calculated. The first toast arrives in tall flutes of sparkling cider, bubbles tickling your tongue as you watch them clink glasses. You almost smile at the fairy tale ritual, until you notice Paul's glass tremble in his hand. Your gaze flicks to Sharon, whose calm smile remains unbroken as she murmurs, "To new beginnings." You taste the sweetness of the cider, laced with doubt. The faint fizz echoes like whispered laughter in a deserted ballroom. That soft whisper, you lean forward as Paul drains his glass in a single swallow. The edges of his vision blur, he blinks once, twice, and you see the tension coil in his jaw. He stands abruptly, chair scraping wood with a harsh screech that cracks the room's genteel veneer. He places a hand on the table to steady himself, knuckles widening. You feel the adrenaline spike, anticipation turning to alarm. Paul's expression shifts from surprise to pain, cheeks flushing with unnatural heat. He coughs, a hoarse staccato that shatters polite decorum. You reach for a linen napkin just as his hand darts for the carafe, eyes seeking relief. The carafe stands half full, glinting in the chandelier's glow. You realize with a jolt that Sharon poured the first cup from a separate decanter she kept discreetly on a sideboard. He staggers toward the window, pressing his palm to the glass as though to anchor himself to solidity. Outside, the apricot orchard breathes in the late afternoon light, every leaf shimmering with innocence. You can almost hear the orchard's tranquil hum beneath the distant cry of a hawk. Inside, Paul's breath comes in ragged bursts, each exhale a plea for help. You step beside him, hand hovering over his back, ready to guide him. The price tag of that gesture weighs on you, trust extended in a moment of peril. You recall that in 1972, forensic toxicology pioneers first used gas chromatography to isolate minute poison compounds, a breakthrough that should have deterred opportunistic killers. Yet here, in this hushed farmhouse, the tools of justice lag behind Sharon's evolving cunning. Investigators still question whether she sourced a custom toxin, one undetectable by standard tests at the time, through a clandestine network of sympathizers. You hold Paul as his knees give way, easing him onto a carved wooden settee. His forehead sweats against your palm, and you catch a whiff of something sharp and green, like crushed hemlock leaves. You glance at Sharon, who stands motionless, arms folded, watching with an inscrutable expression. The soft glow of candlelight frames her face, turning innocent features into a marble mask. A nurse from the local clinic arrives at a knock on the door, medical bag in hand. She kneels beside Paul, checking pulse and pupils. "He's gone into septic shock," she says, brows knitting. Her voice trembles like a thread stretched too thin. Each syllable tightens your chest. You fight the urge to whisper that this feels engineered, a performance designed to obscure intent. The nurse straightens and offers Sharon a sympathetic nod, ignoring the wild look in your eyes. You feel the sting of betrayal twist in your gut, the homey surroundings and ladylike demeanor cannot mask the whiff of atrocity. The nurse departs, vanishing down the gravel drive with footsteps muffled by pine needles. You remain on the porch, wind rustling your hair, tasting the sharp bite of cold air as Paul's life slips away inside. Sharon steps beside you, voice soft as silk. "I suppose we should notify the funeral home," she murmurs. The understatement feels like salt on an open wound. Investigators still question whether Sharon delayed that notification, timing it to span 2 reporting quarters and exploit differing coroner jurisdictions. The doubt coils in you, like fog settling over a moonlit landscape, obscuring the lines between chance and design. You close your eyes against the chill, remembering the trace of bitter almond at Sharon's temple when she leaned in to offer comfort. That fragment lingers, a signal flare in your memory. The orchard's calm hum persists, indifferent to mortal suffering. This second marriage's bloom wilts almost as quickly as it opened. Yet Sharon's composure never falters, her eyes remain glassy with purpose, lips curved in polite condolence that belies inner calculation. You breathe in the orchard scent, honeyed, floral, and deadly sweet. Pause a moment, new love can be a mask for old habits. You rise from the porch swing, boots creaking, and step back into the parlor. The chandelier's crystals cast fractured light across the Persian rug, each glint a reminder of shattered trust. Sharon stands by the mantel, adjusting a framed photograph of her and Paul on their wedding day, an image of warmth and unity now tainted by tragedy. You feel the soft pull of duty as you reach for the coroner's call button, prepared to bring the next wave of scrutiny. The house seems to hold its breath, awaiting the arrival of authorities who will piece together this tragic pattern. But Sharon stands serenely still, as if life itself responds to her command. Your pulse slows to a trembling calm, the adrenaline receding like a tide. You realize that in these Rockies, second acts can be as lethal as first, and that Sharon's talent for reinvention knows no bounds. The orchard outside stands unmoved, its blossoms swaying gently, beauty and danger entwined in perpetual dance. You step through the coroner's office doorway into a dimly lit back room, the air heavy with the acrid tang of formaldehyde and antiseptic. A single overhead lamp swings gently, casting rippling shadows on stainless steel tables. You feel the weight of expectation settle in your chest. This is where Paul Clayton's life gave way to death, and where the similarities to Thomas's collapse become impossible to ignore. By the 1950s, many rural county coroners still lacked the resources for comprehensive toxicology. Subtle poisonings often went undetected beneath a veneer of natural causes. A hush falls as you approach the sheet-draped form. The coroner peels back the linen with gloved hands, revealing Paul's still features. You catch a faint coppery whiff, like blood long since dried, mingling with the cold sterility of the room. His body lies as if in repose, hands folded over his chest, wedding band glinting under the lamp. You can almost trace the echo of Thomas's last pose on that ridge, the identical slump of shoulders, the same fragile piece etched onto flesh. Investigators still question whether the resemblance was coincidence or part of a carefully practiced pattern. You lean closer, toes brushing the tiled floor, and notice tiny puncture marks on Paul's inner wrist, so small they could have been made by a single hypodermic needle or by the prongs of a decorative sugar tong. A quirky rumor persists that Sharon had a custom sugar bowl created with hidden compartments, each capable of holding micro-doses of toxin behind ornate porcelain panels. No lab report ever mentioned sugar vessel fragments, yet the gossip clings like resin on pine wood, a domestic surface concealing deadly intent. Your breath hitches as you remember the storm that raged the night Paul fell ill, lightning flashing over the farmhouse roof, thunder rattling windows like gunfire. You can still taste the metallic sting of fear in the air, the same tang you noted on the ridge where Thomas collapsed. Summary pause, 2 husbands, 2 fevers, 2 deaths, each unfolding like a macabre echo. Trust, once as familiar as a spouse's embrace, shattered under the weight of identical tragedy. You step back, letting your eyes adjust to the gloom. The coroner points to test results spread across a folding table, blood chemistry panels, liver tissue slides, organ weight charts. He notes elevated levels of digitalis compounds alongside arsenic metabolites. You swallow hard, tasting bile on your tongue. In modern FBI statistics, poison cases make up less than 5% of homicides, yet they haunt public memory far longer than shootings or stabbings. The betrayal cuts deeper, executed behind closed doors under a wife's gentle smile. Pulling a chair close, you survey the documents under the lamp's halo. The coroner's typed conclusion lists acute cardiac failure, a neat phrase that skirts around the toxicological anomalies dotted throughout the pages. You trace the scrawl of a deputy's margin note, possible repeated exposure. It's the only hint that someone questioned the veracity of that official verdict. Investigators still question whether pressure from Sharon's powerful insurance contacts stalled further inquiry. You rise, the chair's legs scraping a jittery rhythm on the tile. Outside the window, the first light of dawn filters through frosted glass, painting the linoleum in ghostly stripes. You follow a narrow hallway lined with file cabinets to the morgue refrigerator, its door humming like a slow engine. Inside, Paul's remains rest alongside others, townspeople who never drew public interest. The contrast stings, one body honored with meticulous autopsy panels, the others consigned to cursory inspection. Your fingertips graze a locker's cool surface as you step back, absorbing the realization that Sharon's pattern unfolded in perfect symmetry. First Thomas, then Paul, each death cloaked in plausible medical crisis, each coroner's report neglecting the same telltale chemicals. You feel a pulse of vertigo, as if the room itself tilts under the weight of repeated evil. Later, you find yourself in the sheriff's evidence room, where insurance payout documents rest in a leather binder stamped confidential. You open it to find 2 payout checks, one for Thomas, one for Paul, each for roughly the same sum, both wired into Sharon's account within 48 hours of death. The crisp paper rustles in your hands. You almost expect to see identical serial numbers, as though Sharon had ordered them from a single faceless bureau of fortune. You slip on latex gloves and leaf through Paul's medical chart. Notes from the attending physician mention sudden onset of nausea, racing heartbeat, and confusion, symptoms mirroring Thomas's collapse on that ridge. You note the phrase cardiac arrest repeated in neat handwriting, leaving no room for an alternative explanation. A small typed addendum caught your eye: recommend toxicology expand to include thallium screen. It was crossed out in red ink. You feel anger burn like acid, an opportunity lost, perhaps one of many. You push away from the metal table, letting the sterile chill recede from your skin. Outside, the morning sun rises over the Rockies, and you catch the faint scent of pine carried on a breeze that slips through a cracked window. You recall that in 1938, Anna Marie Hahn became the first U.S. woman executed for serial poisoning, proof that historical precedents existed to catch a killer like Sharon. Yet here, decades later, the same crimes played out on the same rugged backdrop with eerie success. Investigators still question whether Sharon refined her methods between husbands, testing doses on livestock or wildlife before using them on Paul. The debate coils in your mind like mist rolling down a mountain slope, blurring the lines between intuition and evidence. You step onto the porch of what was Paul's honeymoon cottage, now empty and echoing with memory. The wood beneath your boots is smooth from years of use, the railing worn where hands once grasped for comfort. You run a finger along the grain and feel the history embedded in every knot and crevice, love transformed into the site of repeated horror. The valley below hums with the slow whisper of a summer creek, its waters oblivious to human misdeeds. You lean against the railing, tasting the tang of copper in the wind once more. You feel the hush of suspicion settling over this place, as though the walls themselves remember each husband's final breaths. Take a quiet moment to breathe. Let the rhythm of water and wind recalibrate your senses. These mountains have swallowed countless secrets, but the echo of two husbands felled by identical fevers cannot be silenced. With each step away from the cottage, you carry the weight of hard truths, parallel deaths, avoided detection, and one woman's unbroken smile. You understand now that Sharon's greatest crime wasn't the poison itself, but the trust she weaponized, and the painstaking symmetry she wove across two lives. You slip on a fresh pair of latex gloves and step into the hushed fluorescence of the county crime lab, where stainless steel counters gleam under overhead lights and the tang of solvent hangs in the air. Rows of clear glass vials stand at attention, each one labeled with a husband's name, Thomas, Paul, and now the faded label reading number 3. In this sterile cathedral of science, you're about to witness the moment medical examiners piece together a pattern so precise it could only be intentional. A mainstream fact, by the early 1980s, forensic toxicology had evolved dramatically. Techniques like atomic absorption spectroscopy allowed labs to detect heavy metals in hair and tissue years after exposure. You watch Dr. Elena Morales, the lead toxicologist, place a tissue sample under a powerful microscope. Her dark hair is pulled back tight, and her calm breath fogs the glass lens for a heartbeat. You lean closer, the lab's chill brushing against your neck, and you notice tiny crystalline deposits along the hair shaft, specks that glint like frost in the beam of the microscope's light. Those glints are thallium residues, a rare poison once used in rodent control but notoriously lethal to humans. The realization prickles in your spine: this isn't ordinary arsenic, it's a cocktail. Dr. Morales lifts her head, voice soft. Each sample shows the same ratio, 3 parts thallium to 1 part arsenic. She taps a printed chromatogram displaying repeating peaks: his, hers, theirs. You trace the peaks with your eyes, feeling the rhythm like a heartbeat echoing through the lab. Investigators still question whether Sharon sourced the thallium from a defunct mining company in nearby Leadville, using her father's old miner contacts to acquire untraceable quantities. A quirky detail: rumor holds that Sharon once commissioned a jeweler to embed microdoses of thallium in the clasp of a custom bracelet, intending to dose a husband through skin contact rather than ingestion. No fragments of such a bracelet were ever found, yet whispers of its existence linger in murmured conversations among retired deputies. You step around a bench piled with rubber-soled boots and note the tang of pine sap subtly perfuming the antiseptic smell. Morales keeps a sprig of spruce pinned above her fume hood, a little comfort from the Rockies she can't bear to leave behind. You feel the lab's solemn energy settle on your shoulders, heavy as a winter coat. Dr. Morales swabs a sample from a second hair strand and drops it into a vial of reagent. The solution's surface ripples as she adds a tiny crystal of dithazone, a reagent that turns thallium ions a distinctive ruby red. You watch the liquid deepen from clear to rose to blood-hued wine. It's like watching poison transform into proof. You almost taste iron on your tongue, a visceral echo of blood, though none has been shed here. You pace to the edge of the lab and glance through the one-way glass into the adjoining interrogation room, where Sharon awaits. She sits with perfect posture, legs crossed, hands folded. A single beam of afternoon sun illuminates her hair, haloing it like a portrait. Behind her, the wall of closed-circuit monitors shows footage from past interviews, each husband's last moments preserved in flickering black and white. A forensic historian once noted that Mary and Cotton, Britain's 19th-century original Black Widow, loaded arsenic into jam tarts. To her, sweet treats were merely Trojan horses. Here, Sharon's method is more refined, a bespoke poison blend delivered through morning coffee, homemade preserves, or even scented lotions. You feel your skin prickle at the thought of a fragranced betrayal. Dr. Morales gestures you back to the chromatograms. Look at the timeline, she murmurs, pointing to 3 superimposed graphs. Each spike of the toxin coincides with the date Sharon added a rider to a life insurance policy, always within a week. The synchronicity is too perfect for coincidence. Investigators still question whether she recorded these dates in a hidden journal, chronically plotting each husband's demise alongside premium deadlines. You lean in so close the microscope's eyepiece brushes your eyelashes. The peaks stand out like mountain silhouettes, each ridge and valley identical across 3 distinct deaths. You feel a shiver, proof that a single mind orchestrated cold, mathematical destruction. The lab's hum seems to slow, every heartbeat amplified in your ears, reminding you how fragile trust can be when science unmasks betrayal. You step back, letting the gravity of it settle in your bones. A thin strip of paper, an autoradiograph, lies on a lightbox, glowing faintly. The technicians have overlaid sequences from hair, nail, and liver tissue samples. The pattern is unequivocal. This toxin signature is Sharon's fingerprint, one she assumed would never be found. A fringe rumor claims she once tested small doses on the family dog in her trailer, observing vomiting and lethargy before refining her mixture. No animal cruelty charges ever followed, but neighbors still recall the dog's sudden disappearance, another mystery swallowed by the Rockies. You taste bile at the thought, guilt tangling with revulsion. Dr. Morales sets down her pen and folds her arms. We can't call it natural causes anymore. She exhales, wiping her palms on a lab coat sleeve. You nod, feeling both relief and dread, relief that science has spoken, dread for the story it confirms. With each vial you've handled, each sample you've observed, you've traced the contours of a calculated spree. You follow Morales to a small conference room, where case files fan across a table. Photos of coffee mugs, breakfast trays, and wedding rings lie crumpled among the evidence. You pick up an image of a chipped mug, its handle smeared with residue that, under magnification, bears trace toxin. You almost recognize the familiar shape, one from the Coit family parlor. The object feels heavy in your hands, its harmless appearance now stained by meaning. A medical examiner hums as she assembles a timeline on a whiteboard, charting policy edits, toxicology results, and death certificates in precise columns. You trace your finger along the lines, 8 days here, 13 days there, always enough time for official paperwork to process before suspicion arose. The rhythm is clinical, unrelenting, like a metronome ticking down a life's final measure. Investigators still question whether there were additional victims, perhaps girlfriends or business associates who fell inexplicably ill, their cases dismissed as flu or stress. The notion claws at you, a possibility of unseen tragedies hidden behind the same mask. You gather the files, feeling their edges press into your palms. The air is thick with the weight of revelation. You almost hesitate before lifting the binder labeled insurance documents. Inside, the policies list Sharon as sole beneficiary, policies written by her own hand through Nelson and Associates. A subtle conflict of interest, decades before conflict of interest laws explicitly forbade it. You step outside, the lab door swinging shut behind you with a soft click. The mountain air rushes in, cool and bracing, carrying the scent of spruce and stone. You breathe deep, letting the clarity of the lab's findings settle in your mind. Truth can be cold, precise, and unyielding, far more chilling than any whispered rumor. You walk the brief path to your car, memories of Dr. Morales's chromatogram still flickering behind your eyes. Each toxin peak is a testimony, each ratio a confession. You can almost see Sharon's calculating gaze, her lips curving at the edges as she anticipates her next move. Behind you, the lab's windows glow warmly in the evening light, a beacon of truth in a wilderness of deception. You pause, running a hand along your coat lapel, and sense the full weight of what you've uncovered. Sharon Nelson's pattern of poison was no accident, but a meticulously crafted strategy to turn love into profit. You slide into the driver's seat, the door thudding closed. The engine's purr vibrates under you, a low reassurance against the stark precision of the lab's revelations. As you drive away under the Rockies' looming silhouette, one question hovers: will justice match the exactitude of her crimes? You step into the cramped bullpen of the Routt County Sheriff's Office just as Detective Marquez pins a weathered map to the corkboard, red yarn connecting Steamboat Springs, Rocky Ford, and Marble Creek. The buzz of fluorescent lights mingles with the soft hum of computer fans as deputies tap at keyboards, pulling bank transactions and insurance ledgers. In 1992, the FBI launched VICAP, Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, to link seemingly isolated homicides, an early effort to connect patterns like those now binding Sharon's victims. You hover behind a cluster of detectives as one holds up a printed statement from a local banker. She withdrew exactly $250,000 on the same day each husband died, he notes, voice low. You feel the weight of that figure settle in your gut, the arithmetic of death transformed into cold numbers. A fringe rumor claims Sharon once celebrated each payout by releasing a live widow spider into her backyard aviary, an unverified spectacle passed down over campfire stories. The macabre image clings to your mind like dew on night-blooming flowers. Detective Kim crosses her arms, studying the insurance files spread across the table, policies written by Nelson and Associates, policies underwritten by companies across 3 states, policies that always named Sharon as sole beneficiary. You lean in, reading the fine print, accelerated death benefits, double indemnity riders for accidental poisoning, clauses so specific they feel custom-tailored. Investigators still question whether Sharon consulted an inside agent to craft those riders, or if she wrote the policies herself using a discreet typewriter hidden in her trailer. On the far wall, a whiteboard lists witness interview times. You watch Detective Marquez toggle a microphone on, then play a recording of neighbor Mrs. Caldwell describing late-night trips by Sharon to the Steamboat Pharmacy. She bought odd substances, Caldwell says, voice trembling. Lie, bleaching agents, said she needed them for cleaning, but why would you need industrial-strength bleach in a domestic setting? You sense the room lean in as the question echoes. Take a breath, even routine errands feel sinister now. You follow Kim to her desk, where she's assembled 3 separate spreadsheets, one for each husband, tracking policy dates, hospital admissions, and small purchases of chemicals. See this spike? She points to a series of entries, 3 grams of rat poison here, a vial of veterinary thallium there. You trace the columns with your fingertip, the letters smudged where papers were handled most. She adds, she paid in cash every time, no paper trail back to a pharmacy. You can almost taste the metallic sting of those powders on your tongue. Detective Patel enters, tossing an envelope onto the table. Inside, photographic evidence from family albums. Wedding pictures show Sharon wearing a delicate spiderweb lace shawl. It's the same motif every time, Patel says, brow furrowed. She claims it's just fashion, but it's too consistent. You feel a shiver, a bridal accessory turning into a calling card. A quirky detail, locals whisper that the shawl's weaver, an elderly artisan in Pueblo, saw Sharon purchase it alongside unlabeled amber vials, but denied remembering any details when questioned. No official record exists, yet the yarn frays in your mind like the spider pattern itself. You watch as Kim keys in a search warrant on her screen, fingers clicking over the county clerk's database. She frowns at property deeds, 3 cabins in Sharon's name, all bought within weeks of each husband's death. One sits on the banks of Marble Creek, another overlooks a cantaloupe field, the third near a logging trail. You realize she's triangulating a pattern, geography and timing, weaving a net around Sharon's movements. Investigators still question whether Sharon scouted these locations specifically for their isolation, ensuring no neighbors would hear a single cough. You slip out into the hallway, following the echo of footsteps down a corridor lined with dusty case files. You pass a framed poster of historic poisoners, Marie Besnard, Mary and Cotton, legendary figures who once evaded justice for years. A mainstream fact, Mary and Cotton in 19th century England was suspected of up to 21 murders before her trial finally convicted her. That legacy feeds into the room's atmosphere, reminding you how often violence wearing a domestic mask goes unnoticed. At the end of the hall, you find Detective Marquez hunched over the phone, calling executives at Nelson and Associates. You catch snippets, "We need all policy drafts, beneficiary forms, and correspondence going back 10 years. He jots notes furiously, then hangs up. You feel the tension coil in your shoulders. This investigation has teeth now, ready to clamp down. Back in the bullpen, a uniformed officer arrives with a stack of subpoenas served to 3 pharmacies, 2 jewelers, and a single blacksmith rumored to craft custom metal goblets. You watch as Kim hands out copies to her team. "Let's see if those tungsten spider goblets ever existed," she says. The room crackles with energy. You recall a whisper that Sharon once hosted a spider soiree, inviting friends to display curiosities, feathered hats, taxidermy tarantulas, and those mysterious goblets. No records confirm the event, yet the tale clings like cobwebs in your memory. You step back, letting the detectives take over. They spread maps, spreadsheets, and photographs along the table, creating a mosaic of Sharon's life. You hear Marquez say, "We've got her bank, her business, her residencies, her purchases. Now we need to tie it all together with a timeline." You feel the momentum building, each piece clicking into place like tumblers in a safe. The safe here holds the key to justice. Investigators still question whether Sharon realized she was under scrutiny, or if her confidence blinded her to the growing storm. You wonder if she sensed the net tightening and began preparing an escape plan, or if she simply believed her charm could deflect any suspicion. That uncertainty hangs between you like a thread, taut and unbroken. As the bullpen's clock ticks past midnight, you stand and stretch, the glow of computer screens painting your face in pale light. You recall how history has shown that killers often slip when they underestimate the human instinct to connect the dots. The pattern Sharon wove, policy after policy, husband after husband, was meticulous, but not infallible. You turn to the detectives, ready to lend your voice to the next phase, witness interviews. The phone rings again, and you step forward. "Detective Marquez? We're ready to start." Your words feel heavy, charged with purpose. Outside, the Rockies loom silent under a blanket of stars, unaware that their beauty has been tainted by betrayal. You inhale deeply, tasting the acrid tang of determination. The investigation has moved from suspicion to evidence, and you're standing at the threshold where guilt becomes certainty. Each click of keyboard and each stamped subpoena brings you closer to confronting Sharon with the trail she thought she'd buried. You bow your head for a moment, centering yourself amid the flurry of activity. Then, lifting your gaze, you prepare to question neighbors, interview colleagues, and extract confessions. The melody of typing resumes, and you step into the bright glare of interrogation lights, ready to press for answers. You slip on a fresh lab coat and step into the forensic suite, its clean air humming with the soft whir of centrifuges and the faint ozone tang of mass spectrometers. The room's pale walls are lined with tackboards, each inch plastered with crime scene photos, toxicology charts, and clipped newspaper headlines. In 1972, gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, GCMS, became a cornerstone of toxicology, capable of detecting even trace alkaloids in human tissue, a breakthrough that would prove pivotal in cases like yours. A hush falls as you approach the evidence locker, its steel door yawning open to reveal rows of sealed bags. You inhale the sterile air and notice the faint scent of antiseptic mingled with old parchment, like a library of secrets waiting to be decoded. Inside one bag lies a chipped teacup, the one Sharon favored for her morning tea, its rim still bearing microscopic residue. Dr. Morales holds it carefully with tweezers, her latex-gloved fingers steady as a surgeon's. You lean in, watching her apply a droplet of solvent to a cotton swab, then swirl it across the ceramic's edge. The solvent beads glint like dew on spider silk, carrying invisible clues. You settle onto a stool as the swab goes into the GCMS, its oven closing with a soft click. You feel your pulse slow, anticipation mingling with calm curiosity. A fringe rumor insists Sharon once used bone china imported from England, etched with widow's peak lace, to test her doses, believing fine porcelain absorbed toxins more evenly. No import records support that claim, yet the image drifts through your mind like a half-remembered dream. The machine hums, then pings. A chromatogram flickers on the monitor, 3 distinct peaks, a telltale trifecta of thallium, arsenic, and digitalis glycosides. You trace the lines with your fingertip, each crest and trough echoing the mountain silhouettes outside. Investigators still question whether Sharon adjusted her toxin ratios over time, fine-tuning the blend to mimic natural illnesses and evade detection. You rise and drift to a corner where a locked cabinet holds human hair samples clipped from each husband during autopsy. You pick up a vial labeled Nelson No. 2 and run your thumb across the faded ink. In 1984, Sir Alec Jeffreys pioneered DNA fingerprinting, yet long before that, experts analyzed hair for heavy metals, offering a timeline of exposure. You unscrew the cap and sprinkle a few strands onto a sterile slide, then add a drop of dithazone reagent. The solution deepens from pale yellow to rose petal red, each shade marking concentration. You feel the slide's cool glass under your fingertips, the color change sparking both dread and relief. This evidence cannot be unmade. A forensic technician wheels over a digital microscope. You peer through its lens and see crystalline deposits clinging to each hair, like frost caught in amber. You almost taste metallic tang on your tongue, as though the poison itself lingers in the air. Summary pause, science can unspool the darkest plots. Across the room, a deputy unlocks a safe recovered from Sharon's mountain cabin. Inside is a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and spine-bowed. You open it and find meticulous entries, dates, policy numbers, premium amounts, each scrawled in neat cursive. Between these financial notes, you discover margins annotated with chemical formulas, TL2SO4 plus S2O3 equals stable mix. The handwriting matches Sharon's signature on her real estate deeds. Investigators still question whether she kept separate code books to conceal her formulas, or if this single journal was all she ever needed. You turn the yellowed page and find a pressed violet petal tucked between entries, an odd keepsake. A quirky tidbit, locals whispered that Sharon collected wildflowers from each murder site, pressing them in her journals as morbid mementos. No florist could confirm shipments of pressed petals, yet the delicate fragment clings to the page like a ghost. Your gaze drifts to a Polaroid photo pinned nearby, Sharon smiling beside a safe deposit box in Steamboat Springs. You recall how she insisted on naming the box Emerald for her favorite ring. You step forward and pick up the key, engraved with her initials, and slide it into a replica lock on the lab bench. The tumblers click, and you hear the satisfying release of hidden compartments. Inside, you find a small vial labeled Test Sample No. 4, containing clear crystals. You feel the vial's smooth glass burn in your palm, as if holding ice fated to sear your skin. You place the crystals under the microscope and watch them refract light into tiny rainbows. The technician adjusts the refractometer, confirming the substance, thallium sulfate, pharmacological grade. You breathe out slowly, tasting the acrid truth on your tongue. Sharon's planning extended beyond her marriages. Perhaps there were others, friends, colleagues, who never made it onto her official victim list. Investigators still question whether she used the safe deposit box to stockpile poisons for years before acting, or if she replenished her supply through covert contacts in mining towns where thallium was once common. The doubt coils in your mind, a living thing prowling at the edge of reason. You step back and watch as Dr. Morales overlays the journal entries with the chromatogram timestamps. On a digital timeline, policy endorsements, toxic peaks, and journal dates align with uncanny precision. The pixels glow in the dim light, each point a marker of betrayal. You feel a shiver, proof that Sharon's quiet calculations left an indelible trail. Pause and reflect, records betray even the most careful plans. You unroll a blueprint of the Nelson cabin, mapping the placement of vents, water lines, and supply cabinets. A structural engineer once noted that poor ventilation can concentrate airborne toxins, another method Sharon might have exploited. You trace the airflow paths in faint pencil, imagining how she could have introduced toxins through humidifiers, scented candles, or even soap. A fringe rumor has it she once installed a hidden autoclave in the basement, ostensibly for cleaning lab glassware, but usable for purifying poisons. No blueprints confirm such modifications, but the notion clings like mold in damp corners. At the edge of the table lies a small wooden box engraved with spiderweb motifs. You open it to find micromeasuring spoons, lab-grade instruments precise to 1/10 of a milligram. You pick one up and rotate it between your fingers, noting the nick on the handle where a snag of hair suggests frequent use. You almost hear the faint click of its sliding lid, another snippet of domestic normalcy twisted into weaponry. Investigators still question whether those spoons were custom-made by a local silversmith or ordered anonymously through mail-order catalogs, hiding the trail of procurement. The secret lingers in the lab's quiet corners, refusing to be silenced. You step away from the bench, breathing deeply as the lab's chill gives way to a warm flush of triumph. Every vial, every hair, every journal entry has converged into a tapestry of evidence. The room hums with resolution, forensic science has illuminated the signature of a killer. You gather the critical pieces, the teacup swab, the hair slides, the journal photocopies, and place them into a sealed case file. The rustle of paper and clink of glass echo like a verdict pronounced. Outside, the Rockies stand silent and unmoved, their granite faces weathered by time and secrets. Here, however, truth has shattered the facade of normalcy. As you close the case file, you feel the gravity of what you've uncovered, Sharon's web of deceit unraveled by methodical science. And yet, a final question remains: will this evidence be enough to bring her to justice? You step into the stark interrogation room where fluorescent lights hum overhead, draping every surface in a clinical glow. A single metal table sits between you and Sharon, her eyes calm, her posture impossibly straight. You hear the click of the door lock behind you, the metal latch sliding into place like a judge's gavel. In 1966, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Miranda v. Arizona that suspects must be informed of their rights before questioning, an essential protection that ensures every confession has a legal heartbeat. You pull out your notebook and pen, feeling the smooth paper press against your palm. Across the table, Sharon's lips curve into a slight smile, as if she's welcoming you into a private ritual. You push the first folder toward her, photos of the 3 teacups stained with poison, chromatograms from Dr. Morales, the leather-bound journal. The evidence rattles her composure only for a heartbeat before she touches the edges, fingertips brushing the paper like one might stroke an antique surface. "Mrs. Nelson," you begin, voice soft yet firm, "let's talk about that morning on the ridge." Your words settle between you like drifting fog. You notice the faint click of a hidden recorder in the corner, standard procedure, yet the knowledge of being recorded feels as intimate as an eavesdropper's breath. A quirky rumor whispers through your mind. Some say Sharon secretly taped her own interviews, later transcribing them to refine her story. No tape ever surfaced in court, but the idea clings like static in a silent room. She nods politely, eyes steady. "Of course," she replies, voice hushed and velvety, "I remember that morning clearly." You lean forward, watching the tiny tremor in her left hand betray her confident facade. Her right hand remains folded on the table, fingernails painted midnight blue, an unspoken echo of the spider brooch motif she supposedly wore during every public appearance. No one ever confirmed those brooches existed, yet the image stitches itself into every memory of her. You slide a photograph of Thomas's collapse across the table. He was healthy that day, you say. What changed between your last cup of tea and his first feverish gasp? Sharon's gaze flickers to the picture, then back to you, lips parting as if to answer, but instead she blinks once, expression unreadable. Investigators still question whether Sharon timed her story to align with the sheriff's initial natural causes finding, shaping her narrative around law enforcement's missteps. Silence stretches, punctuated only by the soft hum of the air conditioner. You close your eyes for a moment, steadying your breath. Summary pause, the weight of evidence can be deafening. When you speak again, your tone shifts. We have records showing you purchased thallium 2 days before Thomas fell ill. You place a bank statement before her. Her fingers hover, then draw back as though the paper might burn. You watch the color ebb from her cheeks, a quiet bloom of crimson in the sterile light. She inhales, voice soft, "I was researching rodent control for the farm. I had no idea those chemicals could harm a person." The explanation unfurls like smoke, insubstantial. You lean in, voice dropping to a whisper, but the same ratio of thallium and arsenic appeared in Paul's system, and the same day you filed his policy rider. You see her jaw tighten. The room feels smaller now, as if her denials press in around you. You offer her water, she takes a slow sip, nostrils flaring as she tastes the cool liquid. The porcelain cup there on the table feels ironically menacing. You remember the coroner's finding that digitalis glycosides abnormally spiked alongside heavy metals. You place his toxicology report in front of her and mark the page where the values soar. "Mrs. Nelson," you say, voice gentle, "why would someone poison their husband, wait for a payout, then poison another?" She closes her eyes briefly, as if recalling a distant dream. "I loved them," she whispers. The word trembles on her lips, fragile as a moth's wing. Investigators still question whether the confession of love was genuine or another carefully crafted line in her personal script. You watch her eyes glisten, not with guilt, but with something unreadable, a chasm of calm calculation. You flip to a new folder, the journal, open to the page with violet petals pressed against her neat cursive. "What are these?" you ask, pointing to the petals. Sharon's gaze drifts. "Wildflowers," she murmurs. "I collect them." The explanation feels perfunctory, like a child offering an excuse. You trace the faint imprint of flower veins on the page, imagining each petal gathered at a ruinous scene. Silence falls again. You feel the soft tick of the recording device marking every breath. Summary pause, sometimes, the absence of words speaks volumes. Finally, you close your notebook and fold your hands. "Mrs. Nelson, I'm going to step out and allow you to speak with counsel." You push your chair back, the scrape ringing in your ears. Sharon stands, smoothing her skirt with deliberate grace. She inclines her head, lips curving into that same half-smile. "Thank you," she says, voice light as a spider's thread. You exit into the hallway, chest tight with tension. The door closes behind you with a definitive click, sealing her within the final act of this drama. Outside, fluorescent lights cast your shadow long and thin across the tile floor. You feel the gravity of her confession, or lack thereof, settling in your bones. Investigators still question whether Sharon's true confession lies within those unspoken moments, hidden between the questions and the answers. You lean against the wall, exhale slowly, and gather your notes. The interrogation has exposed cracks in her composure but not yet all the truth. As you walk toward the bullpen, the quiet click of your shoes punctuates the journey ahead, witness interviews, legal strategy sessions, and a final push toward confession or conviction. You step through the tall wooden doors of the Routt County Courthouse and into the hushed grandeur of the main courtroom, sunlight slicing through stained glass windows and dust motes drifting like lazy witnesses. The air smells of polished oak and nervous anticipation. You glide down the aisle in second person present, your footsteps muffled by the carpet, finding a seat just behind the press gallery. Televised trials have been spectacles since the 1995 O.J. Simpson case showed how live coverage can turn evidence into entertainment, yet today you know every detail will matter more than any dramatic flourish. The bailiff raps the gavel, a sharp crack that echoes like thunder in a canyon, and the judge calls the session to order. You watch Sharon rise, poised in a charcoal suit that fits her like armor. Her spiderweb cufflinks glint in the gallery lights, an unsettling accessory for a woman on trial for cold-blooded murder. A fringe rumor insists those cufflinks were crafted by the same Pueblo artisan who sold her the spider lace shawl, an unverified connection that clings to the edges of the case like cobwebs in an abandoned cabin. Investigators still question whether she wore them as a taunt to the jury or as a talisman to steady her nerves. The prosecutor stands, voice calm but firm, and delivers the opening statement with measured cadence. Ladies and gentlemen, what we will show you is a pattern: 3 husbands, 3 deaths, 3 insurance windfalls. We will present science, witnesses, and documents proving that Sharon Lynn Nelson weaponized love for profit. You feel the room lean in with every syllable. The defense attorney counters with a soft drawl: "You are not here to speculate on rumors or whispered gossip. You will hear evidence of natural causes and honest mourning." You sense the scales of justice tipping in the balance between fact and doubt. A mainstream historical note drifts through your mind. In 1924, the Leopold and Loeb trial transformed courtroom procedure by spotlighting expert psychological testimony, a reminder that the stories we tell in court can shape a verdict as much as cold evidence. Today, your evidence is forensic: Dr. Morales's chromatograms, the leather-bound journal, and the chipped teacup. Yet you know the defense will challenge chain of custody, human error, and motive. The first witness is Dr. Elena Morales, sworn under oath. She strides to the stand in a navy blazer, hair pinned back, carrying a transparent binder of chromatogram prints. You lean forward, breath slowing to catch her words. Using GCMS techniques perfected in the 1970s, we identified thallium, arsenic, and digitalis in consistent ratios across all 3 victims. She places each print under the jury's gaze, the peaks stand like mountain silhouettes. Investigators still question whether those peaks precisely matched Sharon's own formula notes in the journal margins, or if they could represent coincidental environmental exposure. The notion coils in your mind like smoke. Cross-examination begins. The defense attorney paces, eyes narrowed. "Doctor, you collected these swabs weeks after the summer's rains washed chemicals away. How can you be certain this residue isn't contamination?" Dr. Morales pauses, then calmly explains lab protocols: sealed evidence bags, duplicate swabs, certified chain of custody logs. You watch jurors jot notes, some frowning, others nodding. The defense presses again: "And what of the diary? How do we know those violet petals weren't simply pressed there for sentimental reasons?" Morales's lips thin. "Because those petals were collected that same week each husband purchased new policies, dates we can verify with bank statements." You feel tension snap like a twig, science pushing back against doubt. Next, the prosecution calls Mrs. Caldwell, the elderly neighbor who testified at the preliminary hearing. She shuffles to the stand, shawl wrapped tight, voice trembling. "I saw her that night," she whispers, glancing at Sharon. "She poured coffee at 10 p.m., and he was dead by dawn." You notice the faint tremble in Caldwell's hands as she grips the rail. The gallery is silent save for her soft southern lilt echoing in the high ceiling. Investigators still question whether Caldwell's memory, decades old and shaped by town gossip, can stand up to rigorous cross-examination, but you sense her sincerity, and it resonates more than any lab print. The defense attorney rises again, voice low: "You lived next door for 40 years. Did you ever see Mrs. Nelson buy rat poison or thallium at a hardware store?" Caldwell shakes her head. "No, sir. She sent her husband down the canyon to get groceries." The room hums with uncertainty. If the poison was indeed acquired through subtle channels, community testimony can only go so far. You shift in your seat, tasting the metallic tang of suspicion as statements collide. Then comes the dramatic moment. The defense calls its own expert, a retired coroner who argues that the symptoms described could coincide with acute mountain sickness, a condition local doctors once misdiagnosed regularly. He cites research from the 1950s showing that hikers exposed to 9,000-foot elevation can suffer cardiac arrest-like episodes. You imagine the jury's faces shifting: elevation, environment, natural causes. But when the prosecutor stands to object, the judge overrules. The jury will consider all expert opinions. Investigators still question whether mountain sickness was ever raised at Paul's or Thomas's autopsies, or if this angle is a desperation defense ploy. You feel your pulse quicken, aware that narrative can be as persuasive as evidence. Closing testimony arrives with the surviving ranch hand, who recalls Sharon's spider figurine collection rumor. He holds up a small statuette, black, enameled metal shaped like a black widow biting its mate. "I saw her polish it every morning," he says. The defense cries foul, claiming the figurine was bought after the third death. The hand shrugs, "I don't know dates." The statuette's legs glint under the gallery lights, stirring whispers of macabre trophy-taking. You sense that even unverified details can tip scales when memory is all we have. The prosecution's closing argument weaves science and testimony into a tapestry of betrayal, policy documents, toxin peaks, witness recollections, and that journal's chemical formulas. This was not chance, the prosecutor intones. It was calculation. Then the defense stands, voice softer, "You must find reasonable doubt. Is it possible a loving wife lost 3 husbands tragically? Impossible? Perhaps not." You watch as the judge instructs the jury on their duty: deliberate only on the evidence, consider every element impartially. Sharon remains still, eyes fixed on the lectern, hands folded in her lap. You almost catch a glimpse of that rumored ankle tattoo, a tiny spider hidden beneath her hem, before she adjusts her skirt. You wonder if it's real, or just another echo in the legend of the Black Widow. The jury files out into the hallway, heavy footsteps receding. You remain seated, heart still racing, knowing the next act hinges on their decision. Outside, the Rockies stand silent and indifferent, their peaks untouched by human drama. Inside, though, you've witnessed history, science confronting subterfuge, emotion clashing with logic, and one woman's fate resting on the fragile judgment of 12 strangers. You stand in the hushed gallery as the jury files back through the double doors, their footsteps echoing against marble pillars like a slow drumbeat. The judge's gavel rests poised, waiting to mark the end of a long ordeal. In modern U.S. practice, capital punishment was largely abolished for non-first-degree murders by the 1970s, but lengthy sentences, often life without parole, became the norm for premeditated killings. The courtroom holds its breath as the foreperson rises, paper trembling in hand. You feel the weight of every glance, every whispered prayer from the victims' families seated just rows ahead. Sharon sits rigid at the defense table, charcoal suit pristine, spiderweb cufflinks catching stray rays of sunlight. A fringe rumor insists she commissioned a bespoke black rose corsage, woven from silk threads and tiny onyx beads, to wear at her sentencing, each petal representing one shattered life. No florist ever recalled such an order, yet the idea hangs in the air like a challenge. On the count of first-degree murder in the death of Thomas Mercer, the foreperson begins, voice steady, "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty." A collective gasp ripples through the room. You feel your heart jolt, relief that science and testimony prevailed, sorrow for those lost. Summary pause, justice finds its mark at last. Next, the verdict for Paul Clayton, guilty. The walls seem to close in as Sharon's composure cracks for a heartbeat, eyes flicking toward the ceiling as if seeking escape. Investigators still question whether she realized each verdict was a final blow to her carefully constructed persona. You watch the families react. Thomas's sister bows her head, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. You sense the hollow ache in her shoulders, as though every breath pulls at a wound too deep to heal. Across the aisle, Paul's teenage son presses his lips together, fists clenched on the edge of the pew. You nearly taste the copper tang of grief in the air, an aroma as sharp as broken glass. The final count concerns the third husband you never personally met but whose absence echoed in the dossier, a remote fisherman found drifting face down in Marble Creek. Guilty, the foreperson concludes. A ripple of closure sweeps the room, mingled with the raw edge of unanswered questions. You shift on your feet as the bailiff calls for quiet. The judge speaks, "Mrs. Nelson, you will rise." The clicking of Sharon's heels against walnut wood resonates like a metronome. She stands, chin lifted, expression unreadable, a porcelain doll animated by steely will. The judge recites the sentencing guidelines, 3 consecutive life sentences, with the possibility of parole only after 50 years served, followed by restitution to the victims' estates. The words hang like heavy chains clinking in the quiet. Sharon swallows, lips parting in a micro-gesture caught by the cameras. You almost see a flicker of calculation pass across her eyes. Does she already anticipate splicing years of appeal into decades behind bars? A quirky detail drifts through your mind. Townsfolk whispered she kept a small hourglass on her desk, each grain of sand marking another day closer to freedom or to doom. No prison inventory ever listed such an item, yet the vision lingers. The judge's voice softens as he addresses the families. No sentence can restore what was lost. May these convictions bring you some measure of peace. You watch them nod, some wiping eyes, others gripping tissue so tightly knuckles blanch. You feel their pain as an echo in your chest, a reminder that numbers on a page cannot quantify the depth of sorrow. Sharon's attorney rises for a brief allocution, outlining plans to appeal on grounds of procedural error and alleged contamination of evidence. The words fall flat against the rancid air of betrayal. You sense the jury leaning forward with silent skepticism. Appeals can wind on for years, but they cannot undo the damage inflicted by her hands. You rise too, compelled to observe the final act, the reading of restitution amounts. Clerk after clerk recites costs for funeral services, therapy, lost income, and emotional anguish. The ledger swells like a grotesque tally of human worth. You feel a chill as you imagine Sharon's account balances shrinking under court order, money once earned by poison now seized for loss. Investigators still question whether those payouts will ever truly compensate for lives extinguished or soothe the family's wounds. As the gavel falls again, marking the finality of her fate, Sharon inclines her head in what might be a nod of respect, or a gesture of defiance. You can't decide which. The door behind her opens, and she's escorted past you, flanked by deputies in navy uniforms. Her posture remains immaculate, skirt swaying just so, hair pinned in its familiar style. No trembling, no tears, only the precise cadence of purpose. You follow in silent procession, leaving the courtroom's oak woodwork behind. The corridor's fluorescent lights hum above, and you hear the click of Sharon's handcuffs, a stark counterpoint to her composed stride. Families linger at the courtroom doors, voices hushed. You step aside, offering space as they emerge, embraces exchanged, tears flowing, relief and anguish intertwined. Outside, a press scrum awaits. Cameras whir, microphones thrust forward. Sharon pauses under the courthouse portico. You see her lips press together, then part to deliver a statement. I maintain my innocence and will appeal. My gratitude goes to those who supported me. The words drift across the plaza like a cold wind, self-assured, detached. Summary pause, even in defeat, her voice commands attention. The press erupts with questions, her motive, the evidence, the upcoming appeals. She offers a slight bow, then is led away, silhouette shrinking against the courthouse steps. You catch one final glance, her eyes glinting with a secret knowing. You turn your gaze to the Rockies beyond, silent sentinels looming under a pale sky. Their peaks are unchanged by human verdicts. Yet in their shadow, lives have been altered forever. You feel the weight of truth settling over you, a burden and a relief in equal measure. As you slip into the car waiting at the curb, you sense the gravity of what you've witnessed. the slow unraveling of a life built on calculated betrayal, the catharsis of verdicts rendered, and the sobering reality that some wounds never heal. You exhale, tasting the autumn air mixed with exhaust fumes, a reminder that the world keeps turning, even as justice is served. You linger on the courthouse steps long after the last echo of the gavel has faded, the sky above painted in bruised purples and smoky grays that fold into twilight. You feel the weight of every footstep you've taken in this story, along mountain ridges, through candlelit chapels, into sterile labs and echoing courtrooms, and you notice how the air here, at day's end, tastes of both release and unresolved questions. In 2002, criminologists estimated that female serial offenders comprised less than 8% of all serial killers in the United States, highlighting how rare, and therefore how startling, a case like Sharon's truly is. You draw in a slow breath, tasting the faint tang of evening pine that drifts across the plaza. The world feels more spacious now, as if each star above marks a question that lingers just out of reach. You remember how each husband's last gasp was almost indistinguishable from natural tragedy, how deftly Sharon exploited medical blind spots to turn love into liability. Investigators still question whether she ever paused between the killings or if the rush of each payout simply fueled her next dark impulse. The hush of the Rockies seems to fold around you, offering both comfort and a timid reminder of hidden depths. You notice the crooked bench by the fountain where bereaved families once gathered, their faces framed by lamplight and grief. A quirky local rumor insists that Sharon commissioned custom Black Widow figurines, crafted from obsidian and placed beside each grave as silent trophies, though no museum or private collection has ever confirmed their existence. That image shimmers in your mind like heat haze over an empty meadow. You settle onto the bench, its cold metal biting through your coat, and you let your thoughts drift. The heavy oak doors behind you stand closed, marking the end of formal justice, yet the burden of remembrance remains alive. You feel the pulse of distant water as the fountain burbles, an endless loop of motion that mirrors the unspooling of each life she claimed. In this soft moment of stillness, you realize that the true tragedy extends beyond policies and poison, it resides in severed trust. You recall that the modern term Black Widow entered American crime lexicons only after the 1970s, when psychologists began profiling female offenders separately, acknowledging that motives and methods often differed from their male counterparts. That shift in perspective was meant to illuminate dark corners of human behavior, but it also cast an unforgiving spotlight on Sharon's precise brand of betrayal. You close your eyes against the gentle roar of the town's evening, letting the echo of that spotlight fade into the rhythm of distant crickets. Do you feel the hush inside you, a soft tremor that reminds you how fragile security can be when the person you love wields charm as a weapon? Your chest rises and falls, each breath a quiet testament to survival and remembrance. You brush a fingertip along the frigid metal of the bench's armrest and wonder, when the pages of her appeals are written, will they add new twists or simply retrace the cold calculus of 3 deliberate murders? Investigators still question whether hidden correspondence, letters or diary entries, might yet surface, offering insights into her psyche or revealing a mastermind who taught her these lethal arts. You tilt your head, watching lamplight pool at your feet and ripple over stones slick with dusk. The world seems both infinitely large and intimately small, every leaf a witness, every star a silent jury. You sense the final hush of this case settling in your bones, leaving you both hollowed and graced by the knowledge you now carry forward. Take a breath, slow and steady. Feel evening's quiet shift into night's gentle embrace. You've traversed betrayal and science, sorrow and resolution. Now the questions remain, unanswered, echoing, insistent, yet the journey that brought you here begins to soften into reflection. As dusk deepens, you let the bench's chill dissolve into the warmth of memory. Softly now, in scarcely more than a whisper, you close your eyes and guide your thoughts toward calm shores. Imagine the wind settling over still waters, the surface smooth as polished glass. Each ripple of thought eases away, guilt, dread, sorrow, until all that remains is a faint pulse of peace. Draw in a gentle breath, and feel your heartbeat slow to a soothing rhythm. Inhale the cool night air tinged with pine and earth, and exhale the weight of what must always be remembered. Let your senses drift, the distant murmur of crickets, the soft tinkle of the fountain's last spurt, and the hush of the Rockies cradling you in their silent arms. You are safe now. The echoes of Sharon's crimes recede like a fading tide, leaving behind only the truths you unearthed and the strength you carry. Feel gratitude for the light that justice provides, even when its glare reveals the darkest shadows. In this final moment, surrender to stillness. Let every tense thought unwind, every anxious whisper quiet. You've walked through betrayal's storm, now find refuge in the night's gentle hush. Rest in the knowledge that darkness can yield clarity, that true crime's harsh lessons can guide us toward vigilance and compassion. Sweet dreams.